Hello, welcome to Cinema Savvy, and welcome back to another episode of Retro Reviews. And this is a special one today. So, we are recording this Wednesday night, but as of when this will be going up, which will be tomorrow night or today when you're watching it, Thursday, it will be the 10-year anniversary of the film that we're talking about today, Tron Legacy. Now, if you tuned in yesterday, if you saw our previous video, you know that we did a review on the first Tron. We couldn't jump straight into Legacy. We had to talk about the first one. And for me, this was a shake-up for me because the original Tron and indeed this one were my first time watching these films. So I have thoughts. We haven't really talked about this one at length, although I know that this is one that you really like, George.
Yeah.
But before we get into it proper, we'll just go quickly over the socials and then we'll dive deep straight into this thing.
Absolutely, guys. So, as we always say, the best way to find out when we're going to go live, when we're going to do our videos, is to find us on social media. So, that is Facebook, Cinema Savvy, and Twitter at Cinema_Savvy. There will be a lot of GIFs, a lot of response. We do reply to questions, people that DM us, stuff like that. So, do check that out. We are active on there. We are announcing new content on there. And in regards to today's video, we want to know your thoughts on Tron Legacy. This is premiering, so we will be commenting along. There'll be one of us on replying to your messages. We're excited to see what you think of this film as well. We had a couple of people on for the Tron review at the time of recording, which was earlier this evening. But of course, the best way to help us is to like, comment, share, and subscribe. We're getting closer to our goals, as we've said in the past. We've got a lot of things coming up. We've got a big announcement for... Oh, we're going to announce it at the end of the video, but we can kind of give you a little tease. It's going to be something that's going to take us through from this weekend through to mid-January, maybe.
Yeah.
So we've got a big thing we're going to cover in the next couple of weeks, across the next couple of weeks. So stick around. Once we've finished talking, we'll formally announce that because it's very modern and retro at the same time, 2 in 1. That's my final tease towards that. But yes, we are here to talk Tron Legacy. 10 years to the day. I don't know if we've ever had a review. I mean, retro reviews are new, but I don't know if we've ever had a video that's specifically scheduled on something to do with the release. I know we have one coming up. But that's related to something in canon, more so than release date window. But this is kind of exciting. It's like a first. It's an anniversary. We've done a couple of anniversary videos on some films.
Yeah, and I mean, it's the fact that, I mean, you love this film. This is clearly a film that's near and dear to your heart. You've got a lot of memories to it. We're going to be talking about our first time experience watching the films in a minute, but it's almost like the planets have aligned. It's fate has deemed it so that we talk about this today. And, you know, I always say that Retro Reviews gives us that opportunity to go back and look at some of these films. So it's just worked out. It's just worked out. And I think you were looking ahead at the schedule when we were planning things. We were planning content videos. You saw it was the 10-year anniversary and we wanted to nestle this kind of in between the tail end of the Rocky reviews that we're doing and obviously before we do the new bunch of reviews as well. So people have requested that we talk about the plot and the synopsis for these films. We've just been sort of like taking it as for granted that people know what we're talking about because of how old the films are. But this is, of course, Tron Legacy, 2010's, the sequel to the original Tron film. And the plot for this thing, the son of virtual world designer goes looking for his father and ends up inside the digital world that his father designed. He meets his father's corrupted creation and a unique ally who was born inside the digital world. That is IMDb's synopsis for this thing. I guess we sort of need to talk about first-time viewing and also our thoughts on Tron 1. And mine are going to be really quick. My first-time viewing for this was a matter of hours ago. Actually, almost down to the wire. I think I finished this thing just after 9 o'clock. That's about an hour before we're recording this. And my thoughts on 1, you can go back and watch our previous video for my thoughts on that. Suffice it to say that it felt like a film that was very ambitious, and I applaud it for its ambition. Came out in '82. I think it was the first or one of the first computer animated films, or what was trying to integrate that kind of technology into films to that standard. I did think it was very slow. Didn't really care for the characterization, and the effects obviously don't hold up with all those years later. But I applaud it for the passion that the original creators had. And that's sort of my original thoughts. That's my thoughts on the original Tron. I do have very different thoughts on this film, though. So that's my opinion going into it. How about you, George?
Yeah, so combining the two. So thoughts on the first one was I'm not the biggest fan. I respect it to a point. I think that's the word I kept using when we did the review, that everything it did in regards to technology, what they were trying to push the limits of, is stuff that you can commend. Whereas I wasn't fully invested within the characters, within the story. And I think I said that a lot of that does come down to the fact that it wasn't my entrance to the Tron series. That was with this one. whenever as a key going forward, whenever I like try and get my friends to watch them, I actually just don't tell them to watch the original because it's
I can
already bad
see that.
enough. It's
Yeah.
already bad enough trying to like convince them to watch things like Star Wars, which is easy to go back to the old films, but people don't want to do it. I'm like, you know what? If they're not even going to watch like the original Star Wars trilogy first, how on earth am I going to get someone to watch Tron and then Tron Legacy? Because that's just bad vibes. That
They're
being
night
said,
and day as well, aren't they? Like we'll talk about that in a minute, but visually couldn't
yeah,
be more removed from each other from the original to the new one.
yeah, this one is everything for me. So this is I think we did a video earlier in the year. If you haven't actually seen it, it was really good. It was some of our favorite cinema experiences, and I think I put this one in there. I did on the thumbnail, sorry. And this is the first film I ever saw at the IMAX. My first ever IMAX screening. This was December 2010. It wasn't release date. It was sort of Christmas break. You're off school. You know, you want to go on dates with like your mates or their family and stuff. And friends like, oh, I'm going to cinema to watch Tron. I was like, oh, can I come? I've wanted to watch it. No one I know wants to go. He's like, yeah. He's like, we're going to this place called the IMAX. I was like, oh, I've heard of them. Never been to one. So as many people do, the old think tank in Birmingham, if anyone's been that way, it's now shut down. It's a great IMAX for 3 years. And I just looked up at this dome. I was like, whoa. Like, it was in a science center, but it was like a dome hidden at the top that was like the IMAX, and it was like one screen only. And it was incredible. Everything from the first moment. The trailers I'd seen, I really liked the look of. I wasn't a fan of Daft Punk at this point. After this film, after those 2 hours, the soundtrack was bought, became one of my favorite soundtracks ever made. We'll get to that properly later. They're one of my favorite composers. I always use the word composers, not musicians.
Oh, the composers. The composers.
Yeah, they are. It's when. Yeah, it's one of them. I used to check like the news all the time in the hope that they would be touring. They still aren't. They've done more albums since, but that's another story. This film changed a lot for me, and I was sat there sort of. I was driving early and I actually had the soundtrack on, so I took a break watching the film because I had to nip out to get something. I was like, okay, I'm going to listen to the soundtrack up to the point of where I'm currently at in the film. And I just sat there driving along to it, saying, you know, I've got so many great memories, like flying down the motorway, listening to Derez and stuff like that. And I'm really all over the place. We'll get to that later. Anyway, for sports watching it, game changer. You know, I was thinking at it. That's what I was trying to say. If I had been 6 or 7 when this came out, I mean, I was 14 and it's had a massive impact on me. If I'd been the Star Wars age of 3, 4, this is probably my favorite from growing up. It's that taking you into that new world. And it's like, this isn't like anything you've seen before. And I had that at the age of 14 when I've seen most Marvel stuff at this point in time. I've seen Star Wars, I've seen some Star Trek, I've seen so much. But this is something new. And this is what it felt like to me. And I was gripped by that. And I was obsessed with this film for a long time. I almost bought they did a disc docking station. I didn't even have an iPod at the time, but I almost bought it as a birthday present, and it was sold out everywhere in every HMV. And I almost bought it when I got my first paycheck a couple of years later. Didn't actually get great reviews, but it was a Tron docking station. Like, how much better could it get? And this film had a tremendous impact on me. I'm still ranting at this point in time as well. I'm trying to avoid the rant, but 3D. We talk about how 3D died. This
was shot in 3D, wasn't it? I think this one.
This was shot in 3D. This was up there with Avatar. When I got my 3D TV, I upgraded it to 3D Blu-ray. There's not been a 4K cut yet, which pains me. I tweeted it earlier. I really wanted to tweet to all the Disney accounts, but they're not going to see. They're not going to care. We still don't have a 4K cut. My dad walked into my room. He was like, "That looks unreal. That's 4K." I was like, "No." I was like, "That's normal." I was like, but if this was 4K, I would be afraid at how powerful that image would be, because it's stunning as a hint for what we're going to get into. But this film is probably up there. You know, as I mentioned earlier, it was in that cinematic experience one, but the last sort of couple of years, it's had this such a big thing, and there's been no sequel, which I guess we'll get to later as well. There's been no sequel, no nothing. And you know me, you know how for how many years I've said, all I want is a Tron 3. It's like we're getting Jared Leto Tron. I'm kind of like, I don't want a Jared Leto Tron. I'll take it because it's Tron, but I don't want it because we should have had Tron 3. Rant aside, because we've got a whole review to do. Yeah, this had a pretty big impact, and it's really sad because it was like Chris was like his 30 seconds, me like I don't want to give an essay, but here I am. But that being said, I think the first time watching is a very important thing because I can let a lot of it go because I was so blown away. There are issues with this film. It very much reminds me of the Star Wars prequels, which we'll get into later on, which is also probably another reason why I've got that attachment. Very different. Actually, not just Star Wars prequels. When we get to a character, I need to actually discuss The Last Jedi. I'm going to save that fun beat till later on.
Where is this review going? Like,
I don't know. I don't know. Like it's a Cooper on a Last Jedi 3 anniversary. I'm joking.
Say this is news to me, folks. Watching this along, like I don't even know where this review is going to go by the end of this thing. But George, I
I'm going to be
suppose,
Charlie Day.
do you want me to? Yeah. Do you want me to put you out of your misery finally and tell you what I think of this film, whether I like it or not?
I think I know where it's heading, but just give me your broad overalls because I'm intrigued.
Okay, it's fine. I enjoyed it. It's a solid film. I think it's maybe down to the fact that you have had that history with the film. This as a first IMAX experience, like visually, and that will be one of the biggest things that I praise about this film. My God, like I can only imagine seeing this on the big screen, an IMAX screen, let alone. So I think, okay, compared to the first one, I think this is a vast improvement on the first Tron film. Now, where I'm kind of flip-flopping between the two is that with this one coming out in 2010, you'd had Avatar the previous year. CGI had been around for a long point at that film when this came out in 2010. So you are looking at this CGI world and this world created in a computer program. And it looks great, and hats off to all of the. I think it took them like 2 years to like do all the CGI in this film. I think I read somewhere like so many shots were completely digital or whatever. Hats off to all the creative teams that were behind this thing. It looks amazing. The color palette, which I think has spurred on a lot of video games, the whole like blue and orange seems to be like a focal color. Even thinking to recently, the poster for Blade Runner 2049 was very much that blue and orange color, and I think that's a color palette that may have been stemmed from this. The kind of glossy iPod look to everything, I think it really works for Tron. It's a completely different visual style to the first one. That being said, it looks great, but I am watching it with, well, we can do anything with computers now. Whereas I look at that original Tron film, and it looks terrible for the most part. It really, really does. But I have that reverence for it where I'm like, they were trying new things. They were thinking outside the box. They had all of these different post-production processes, like really meticulous time. They had to do things frame by frame. So even though it looks crap, the original Tron, I have more appreciation for it with its effects because they were doing new things with it. So it's kind of that weird flip-flop with this one. This is obviously way more digital. There's way more things they can do. And in all honesty, like I think this is probably what the original Tron film would have looked like had they have had all of these tools to play with. Just down to everything, the light cycle chases are much more impressive in this, which of course they would be. All the stuff in the sky with the, I don't know the names of all the things in the Tron lore, the sky sail, the solar sails, whatever they're called, I don't know what they're called. Everything looks fantastic. So my biggest takeaway from this is just the visual conceptual design of this world. And I actually think that Joseph Kosinski had most of the idea himself for this. I don't know if he should take sole credit for it, but I remember when he was pitching this idea to Disney, he said, give me some money and let me go away and like make a couple of minutes demo of what I visualize this new world to be. Because he says, I can't describe it. You need to see it. And then I think he went away with some effects teams. They threw something together and then pitched it to the Disney bosses. So I really appreciate it for him. And even the director as well, Joseph Kosinski, this was his first film. Now, usually directors, not all the time, but usually they'll do some like smaller drama things just to get their foot in the door. And then usually they'll get snapped up by a bigger company. This is just Disney is your first gig, a sequel 30 years after the fact, and a completely new imagination of this world. That must have been so much on his shoulders, but I think he did a really good job with it. My shortcomings with this is I didn't care for the lead actor.
Yeah,
Garrett Hedlund, I thought he was really flat. I didn't really get much from his performance. Didn't really have much charisma in that lead role for me. Kind of similar to Jeff Bridges in the first one. Now, I love Jeff Bridges, but even in that first Tron, there's not really much character to him, is there? They do a much better job with his character in this film in that they actually give him a character, which is really nice. So I think for me, mostly it was just like a performance, and I didn't think the story was all that engaging. It was just bad guy wants to take over the world kind of thing, and it doesn't really go beyond that. So that kind of let it down for me. I'd say I don't like giving numeric values. If I was going to say out of 10, that stuff kind of dragged it down for me to about a 7. Like, it's still a high score. I still had good fun with it, and visually it's impressive. The music as well. Visually, it's phenomenal. I cannot fault it at all, but it's just sort of that other stuff, the story and the characters. I didn't really become massively emotionally invested with the stuff that was going on, really.
and that is the main criticism that I myself and many take, and that's why I brought that prequel comparison very early to get into it. Prequels, they look good. It's the technical development. It's that kind of not style over substance, but Joseph Kosinski fascinated me. I remember seeing some behind the scenes stuff, and they just kind of, oh, he's got a degree in architecture. I was like, what? Like a lot of film directors will be like media or like English writing or something random. In Ivan Drago's case, it's like science, isn't it?
Chemistry. Is he a chemist? I think I'm not sure. Something.
But like architecture, and then you watch Tron. It's like that's why there's an architect who's been able to direct this film. There's all these scenes of him because my sister has a degree in architecture, so we see these models and everything, and it just reminded me of like when she was. I mean, she was at uni at the time, and it was like, oh my god, like that guy that did Tron does what you do, and she's like, no, it was very different. But that
you can see it though. There's like an
yeah.
order and a form to everything, even though it's digital. You can see that everything's constructed, which, of course, it is in canon in the film. It's been constructed, but you can see that it definitely gives
engineering side.
You might not pick up on it blatantly, but you can see that it's not just sort of like hodgepodge together randomly. There's a rhyme and reason to everything.
Exactly, and I think that's a really big thing. Jumping in, it is those, and you mentioned the criticism of Sam, that is the general consensus that before we, like I said, Garrett Hedlund, like he's the last couple of years he's done some more dramas. His acting's massively improved, but certainly before he gets into the grid, there's not that natural charisma. And Jeff Bridges, we'll get to him as well, and is phenomenal in this. And it's in the first one, like you get these Jeff Bridges moments. It's like it's young Jeff Bridges, and we're getting some of his mannerisms, but we're not. There's something missing about the performance in that first one, and I feel that with Sam that I like him, but I'm not fully there with him. I'm more interested in Clue, or I'm interested in Cora, or I keep saying it's Kevin Flynn. I just keep saying Flynn. We're just going to call Flynn the dad because it's easier to say Sam. And he's just not as cool as them. And it reminds me of that, not the Harry Potter syndrome. It's that kind of like hero's journey type stuff where ultimately a lot of the time they can be the least interesting, and you're more interested in the people they're on their adventures and journeys with who have these moments to come in. And okay, they're the people I want to spend more time. They're the ones I want to see. They're the ones that have the lasting impact. But I don't get that with Sam, and some of that is the performance. It's kind of like he wants to be cocky, but you can't pull off being cocky because it doesn't feel like it.
Yeah.
And I do like him in this, but there is something missing compared to, I'm not saying other actors and stuff, because obviously I've grown attached to it, but it kind of is that again. That I feel bad. Attack of the Clones, Hayden Christensen type thing, right?
I was going to go there. I didn't know whether it's okay to go there anymore.
Yeah, I know. No, it's fine. But, it is that like young actor. Now, obviously, Hayden's going to come back, obviously, but now we're seeing that 10 years down the line, Garrett Hedlund's done other films. I think he does like country music singing, but he's been in a lot of better projects. You mentioned, I forgot the Coen Brothers, the one of Oscar Isaac.
Llewyn Davis.
Inside Llewyn Davis, who's in Mudbound. He's been in a couple of other ones I've seen, which I've forgotten the name of, but he's done all right for himself. And I think he's had more of that. He'd always be Flynn from Tron, but he's been able to at least do other work to get other work, not for the fact that he was from Tron. Yeah. That's a really big thing. But as that sort of protagonist that you're there, when we talking Tron 1 yesterday, is really good because you were like, we don't really feel like we're following anyone in this world. It feels like we're just chucked in there. Whereas I think that's what I think Legacy does neater, is that it's a very similar plot to a point. Yeah. Ultimately, go into this world. They need to escape it. Need to get themselves back to reality. Obviously, this one does it a bit more in detail, world building and all that stuff. But I feel that as an entry point, it's a lot better at following the protagonist than it does in the last one. From being on that start to end journey, you learn the stuff with him. It's a really good entry point for people that haven't seen the original. I think that's why it's so easy to gravitate towards. And I don't think you even need to have seen the original to understand the lore to the world. You get the great opening scene where they say what the grid is. You get the kind of creepy doorstep scene, which we'll get to, no doubt. But everything's set up for you just to watch Legacy. You don't need to watch the original. And I think that's a really big thing for me, that you can come into this. And again, that prequel thing is, we could enter the I mean, you saw the original Star Wars before the prequels, but I could enter episode 1 of Phantom Menace and not have to know what's going to come down the line. No,
I didn't. Phantom Menace was the first one I ever watched. Yeah.
But like, it's a great entry point. It doesn't. Some prequels, you need to know what's going to happen down the line first. I mean, this isn't a prequel, but this is that bringing a new audience. I think Force Awakens, you can kind of do it a lot harder than the other two Star Wars trilogy entry points, but this is one of them where it's a really good way. And again, I think the right age is a really good word to have watched this for the first time. It's not an ET, but it's that cinema environment, teen years, something new, something different to what I've already seen. Not growing up Star Wars, but Star Wars is gone in 2010. What can be my new franchise? And obviously, we didn't get anything. We've got Tron Uprising, which is a great discussion for another time. Another Tron thing ruined and cancelled too early. But yeah, Sam's a weak point, and ultimately the story, because it's so traditional A to B to C. It's ultimately linear storytelling. There's nothing new. It's not doing anything new in terms of story. It's all about the world, and I think that's where my kind of love for it comes, is because it's new, because it feels different to things I've seen before. Even you mentioned Avatar is a good point. It's you get them cringy cinema adverts like, we're going to take you to another world. It's like, are you though? Like, are you? Like, you look at some films, it's like, oh, look, that's just a forest in America. You get that in a lot of things, and Avatar did it fine, but Tron was like, that is something I don't think anyone could do. That is something so unique. And again, Disney, I mean, in 2010, they're not Disney of 2020. They haven't bought Lucasfilm. MCU-wise, there's only been 3 entries at this point. Iron Man 2's just come out in cinemas. There's not... I remember...
Oh, we've lost George again. Don't worry, folks. I'll only be for a few seconds. Oh, hang on, he's back.
Sorry.
He's back.
I was going to say the Thor. I saw the Thor trailer at the Tron Legacy screening. That's how long ago this was. God. And not to pioneer into a Disney discussion, but Disney in the noughties were not the powerhouse they became in the 10s. Yeah. And I think for them to commend 170 mil, big budget on a sequel to a 28-year-old cult film, that took a lot of balls, and fair play to them doing that.
You would not get that now with Disney.
That's why we're not getting it, because Tomorrowland failed. Someone please explain to me in the comments why the failure of Tomorrowland had to impact Tron, which already had 2 predecessors.
And I think with something like Tron as well, we'll probably get onto this at the end where we talk about the future of this franchise. Does this franchise have a future? Do we think it's where it's going to go in the future? As technology is constantly adapting, there's so many parallels you could draw between that and Tron. So Tron could always be fresh. You could always do something new with it because technology in our real world's advancing, computing and everything like that. The Tron that we saw and the technology that we had 10 years ago has now been far surpassed, and we've got way more things coming out now and other applications that could be great in a Tron film. But just going back to Sam really quickly, I think it's a shame that we don't have a more charismatic lead, because I do think that really lets the film down. But going back to your point about having an audience proxy character, I think that the structure of this film is far better than the first one. Yeah. Precisely for that reason, that we spend time in the real world at the beginning, which I know we kind of do with Tron, but Tron seemed like back and forth, and you're focusing on characters and situations, and we don't have context at this point. So you really have that sort of like fish out of water kind of character. I approve of the character and the journey of the character and the structure of the film. It's just, I think, mostly down to the performance of him, which kind of lets it down. But going back to it, where you said that this could be viewed as like an isolated film. So this film was co-written by 2 writers. You've got Edward Kitsis and Adam Horowitz, and Horowitz kind of talked about the challenge of writing something, a sequel so far on, and all the different things, all the different parameters you've got to cater to. And it's got that he claimed that the challenge was to, quote, homage the first film, continue the story, expand it and take it in another place, and open up for space for new fans as well. And I think that's basically anything in any kind of soft reboot or continuation you're doing. For a completely different audience, when technology has advanced so much, it must have been really difficult in the planning stages. Like, where do we take this story? How do we get them back in the program? How do we get what's Jeff Bridges been doing? How do we bring him into it? And I guess that's a good segue for the character of Flynn as well. We get 2 Flynns in this film. We get one aged Jeff Bridges, and we get one terrifying de-aged Jeff Bridges. Now, I didn't see this film at the time, so I don't know what this would have been like seeing a de-aged Jeff Bridges at the time with the technology that we have. We've seen it happen more and more concurrently now in films. We had Paul Walker in the Fast and Furious films. We've had it happen a lot in the Marvel films as well recently. Most infamously as well with Tarkin. That's more recreating a dead actor rather than like a de-aged actor in that instance. But we've seen it a lot more now. And unfortunately, I don't think it's an effect that stands the test of time. Now, for me watching this, it was wildly distracting right from the opening scene. Some scenes where it's low lit and it's in the distance or a mid shot, was fine, but there are so many times where they're capitalizing on it. There's close-ups, and it's the really animated face, and it looks like something from Uncharted, and it just looks weird, and it doesn't mash. Now, I guess you could kind of say, well, it's in a video game world for the most part, so you can kind of just chalk it up to like a digital version, but they do it in the real world as well.
Yeah, that's the
did
thing.
take me out of it, but what I will say about it is that it's nice that Jeff Bridges actually does get a character in this. And I like what they do with him as well. When we're introduced to him in the actual world, the real Jeff Bridges, and not the duplicate version, the evil one, he's almost like this Buddhist monk. Is almost or like a deity, like a god. He's almost in like Buddha pose, and he's meditating. And by the end of this film, he basically becomes Obi-Wan Kenobi.
He's the Last Jedi.
Yeah. That's the comparison. You go, oh, okay.
That has been my thing. I'll let you finish the point. I'll get into it because this hit differently a couple of years ago when I suddenly saw Luke Skywalker come back, and I'll go. So I loved Jeff Bridges in this. Both Clue, I liked. So here's the de-aging thing. It's not aged well. I was reading a quick wiki of de-aging film, and I think when you look at the big thing. So as far as I'm aware, the company, I've not seen Benjamin Button. They use the company. There's a couple of shots when they have to basically put Brad Pitt's aged up via makeup, but he's aged down when he becomes done. Basically, the way Benjamin worked, they had the company that did a couple of shots in that to make this for Tron Legacy. Now, what I will say, 10 years ago, this is obviously I've not seen many Jeff Bridges film. I've seen him as the guy from Iron Man 1. I've seen him in a couple of things, not many. So I'm not saying the hype train. So I love Jeff Bridges. I hadn't seen Big Lebowski at this stage. I wasn't aware of his probably legacy as an actor, and I was like, wow, they're making that old guy from the trailers look really young, and that's really impressive. And that's how I felt in 2010. Now, here we are 10 years later, and this is probably the thing that's aged more than anything. Well, probably the only thing actually I'm going to say that's aged in this film is the de-aging technology, which is a testament to the other CGI. But it's also evolution catching up. And what I will say, not necessarily outright defending it, it's what I feel, because with the Marvel films, it's like, we've got Michael Douglas. You know what would be good? A young Michael Douglas cameo. You know what would be good? A young Robert Downey Jr. cameo. You know what would be good? And you get the point. We keep getting these people younger and younger with the aging tech. How many of them serve a purpose, bar maybe Sam Jackson in Captain Marvel? None of them. They're there as we're doing it because we can. Now, to me, the way Clue was written in Tron, one of the beauties of seeing Tron the first one later was finding out that Clue was this minuscule thing in the first film. He was a program that got killed off in the first couple of minutes. Didn't make any sense back then, but they turned it into a really interesting character. I like the fact that because it's trying to do something new, they're not doing it because they can. They're doing it because I want this program. I want this carbon copy of Jeff Bridges that didn't age because it's a computer program. How could it age? And I really like that it's more the ambition of it. Now, I think it works to a point. As you said, you get some shots where it's terrible, some shots where it's great. I think the core of it works and the idea works. I think it's something that was just a couple of years ahead of what they could do now. I've only seen Captain Marvel the once. I remember it looked phenomenal on Sam Jackson, and it looked far more noticeable on Coulson than it was on. I mean, Sam Jackson's barely aged anyway. Let's be honest. He's aged wonderfully. He's more of a polite way to say it. But yeah, this film is now that de-aging's become this overused thing. I would be really intrigued. I know I've seen a couple of deepfakes online recently, and I saw someone from Ireland actually tweet saying, it's fine that you can deepfake 1980s Jeff Bridges onto the Tron Legacy thing, but you can't deepfake 1980s Jeff Bridges when you're on set. It's not how it works. You can do it now because they're deepfaking on top of the Tron Legacy layer. And I kind of sat there thinking like, wow, if only there was a 10th anniversary cut or remaster or 4K copy, something they could have done during lockdown. Granted, it'd be very expensive to go over that footage again and do it, but I would be so intrigued to see if Disney wanted to put the money into it. What if they could do a simple remaster? What could they do to make that different now? Because today was the first time I've seen this in probably a year and a half maybe, but it's the first time I've been, not on a smaller screen like downstairs or on a train at a football stadium or something like that. This was completely different, and I was like, wow, it looks like a gummy bear. Like some of it's the chin or the mouth. It's that because it's not natural. The human eye catches out. That's just how it goes.
The hair as well. The hair was CGI too, wasn't it? I think the whole face, the whole
yeah,
hair. And I think, yeah.
When they filmed it, so they had a double on set plus Jeff Bridges. So you had Jeff Bridges in the grey hair because he's playing the role of Flynn. So he's doing 2 roles in this film, and he's got the dots on his head. He's got the motion capture stuff. So they can't even be like, please go clean shaven and do all of your Clue scenes, because he can't, because he's got to stay in his character to look like he does in this. So that's probably something that didn't help too much. But I think for 2010, it's passable, and I can let it slide because I know how. Now I need to research this one. I believe Disney owned the company that did this, that do the de-aging, which is why you saw it in Marvel. A Star Wars got it last year, but this has been something they've developed that's got stronger and stronger. And I think if Tron is that starting point, I know we were chatting off earlier today. You mentioned the Arnie stuff in Terminator Salvation. I believe this is the first one in terms of pure motion capture performance de-aging. So I'm intrigued. It is probably the weakest point of that. But everything else with him, like I think Jeff Bridges is phenomenal. Now, shall I talk my Last Jedi comparison?
Yeah, go on.
Is it time? So, someone that never knew, I was like, okay, that's his dad. He, as you said, he's like a deity. Like he's in the white robes. He's like doing his Baby Yoda on the stone thing. Like he's meditating. He's this god, and no one's going to whisper his name on the grid because that's the one thing Clue can't cope with. Clue runs the sea, but he's not Luke Skywalker. He's not Flynn. And the whole point of this is you get to the nightclub scene when the lights go down. He's got this insane hoodie, which I want, which is like a black hoodie with lights on the inside. Like that'd be sick for going out on a walk with. And it's everything about this guy's been built up to these people as like the guy that created the world, the god, everything, and he's not been seen for 20 years. And he's coming back, and they're all. I know it's a bit on the nose, like they're all praying and all the stuff like that. But I really like that angle they approach it. But he is this Buddha, and he's the one thing that Clue fears. And I watch The Last Jedi, as many people do. Now, we won't have a Last Jedi outright discussion, but there is a very similar trajectory to Luke Skywalker, I will say. He believes he's failed. He's left himself alone. He's took himself away from the rest of the world, away from civilization, and he's just kind of gone there to die. He's letting his family go because he knows he can't do anything, and he's lost. And the person he failed is the person that's now in control, Kylo Ren. And there's this comparison. I remember I think I rewatched Tron. It must have been like a couple of months after Last Jedi, and I was like, wow, this is really similar. It's like, and I will say this because I you know me, I adore Last Jedi. I love the Luke Skywalker stuff, but it does make me sort of sit back and think, you know what, like, if only the green lightsaber, because he's the deity, but we actually get to see him do some of that stuff. Now we do get the phenomenal scene in The Last Jedi, but it does make me think, like, I wonder if there was like a Last Jedi where it was basically just Kevin Bridges. Because do you see where I'm coming from? Character arc, the self-sacrifice at the end.
Oh, Jeff Bridges.
So Jeff Bridges, Mark Hamill in Last Jedi, whatever you want to say.
You said Kevin Bridges. I was like, who's Kevin Bridges?
Sorry, Jeff Bridges. That's the crap comedian, I think. But there's a very similar character arc, 7 years apart. Now I don't know. I'm the only one that's ever spotted that. I do love Last Jedi. We won't have that discussion now.
I was going to say,
do you see where I'm coming from?
A couple of counterpoints. I can see it. I can see it roughly. I think that there is. It's differently handled in Last Jedi.
Yes,
but
handled's a much better word. Handled's a better word.
On paper, I can see the comparison there to it. But and what I love most about it is actually, and this is kind of a spoiler for the film, and I would have liked more of this. I think, ironically, oh god, it's kind of weird. So you know how the first Tron film I said was really slow. And like the action didn't hold my attention, and it was just really dreary and slow and boring. It's a really slow film, the first Tron film. There's a lot more action in this one, obviously, because they have more of the budget and the more of the opportunity to do it. I wouldn't have minded a more slower, methodic, more like Blade Runner 2049 feel to this film. Now, you absolutely need like light cycle things in there, but there are certain like themes in this. As I mentioned, there's like a bunch of sort of like religious allegory themes to it. I mentioned like the Buddha thing, Christianity, resurrection. I think even Cora, who we'll get onto in a second, Olivia Wilde's character, she based a lot of her character on Joan of Arc, the historical figure, and I think she researched the character of Joan of Arc and the certain ideologies of her in real life to her character for this. So there's a lot of those, and I've liked to have seen those fleshed out a bit more. But one of my favorite bits, probably my favorite bit of the film actually, is at the very end when they're at the portal and you have Jeff Bridges talking to Clue.
Yeah.
And in that moment, Clue isn't the villain, because you can understand why Clue is doing what he means to do. He has an objective. He wants to see that objective through to the end. And that was what he was programmed to do. So he's not a villain. And essentially, like Jeff Bridges says it at the end, like, you're only acting this way because that was where my mind was at the moment. But I've had all these years to meditate, to think over things. And I'm a different man now. I'm an older man. I'm a wiser man than I was back then. And you kind of, you personify the ideologies that I had at the time. So your faults are basically mine as well. And I love that. And even kind of like the symbolism of him embracing him at the end, becoming one with him and then destroying and taking down the grid. Or so we think. I don't know what they do for a sequel, but it looks like at the end, it looks very final. It looks like everything's completely wiped out with the creator itself. But I love that exchange at the end. And I thought that was beautifully handled. And I wanted more kind of thought-provoking stuff like that in the film, maybe. But even the fact that this one went there, which the first one didn't, in my opinion, maybe towards the end, taking down the MCP and everything, but it's much more blatant in this film, I think, and that was the stuff that I gravitated towards the most, because it feels mythic. It almost feels like a legend in itself.
The Legend of Luke Skywalker. Sorry, that's what they called it.
Are you going to have like a little child playing with like a wooden figure at the end?
I mean, we had it at the start of the film, right?
Oh yeah.
Anyway, let's stick to Tron. I promise you, that's one of my last Star Wars things I'm going to talk about. The rest will be like, I want Kaczynski to do Star Wars, etc. That's the scene. That's one of my favorite scenes. For all the action, when it does want to do the dialogue, there are some meandering scenes. The Solar Sailor scene takes a bit longer than it needs to. You get some bits like that, but the final, because you've had the battle in the sky, which is cool, but it's all about that face-to-face confrontation between Clue and Jeff Bridges. It's because he's Kevin Flynn. And it's such a well-done scene. And it's even the build-up to that, when he's like implanting the memories throughout the film. You've got the amazing scene when he arrives at his hideout. You've got that incredible shot when they come up the elevator. And he gets that memory flashback of I am Clue, and it's the creation process. And I love their relationship because he has been programmed for perfection. And that's the quote that's kind of stuck with me for years. Like, you can apply it to like just normal life. Like, perfection is unknowable. It's impossible. That's what I've always kind of followed with this film. And I think it's quite enduring that when you've got this literal, you are programmed via a computer via X, Y, and Z, computers can't process thought. They can't evolve the programming. And that's why I love what they do with him. And that's why he's on this idea that, my programming of perfection is to get everyone from this world into the real world and implant it onto them too. And he's kind of, you feel sorry for him at the end because the whole creation has been a lie, and it's a phenomenal scene. Now, the nuclear wipeout is, I've got my theories. As far as I'm aware, all the sea is like just the infrastructure destroyed. The sea of simulation, they called it. A very weird name. Love the name though. The sea is alive, and I'm guessing the core of the grid is there's just no buildings and probably people. Obviously, we're not ever going to find out because they're doing Tron, something else, which we'll talk later. It could mean Tron's alive because he was last seen in the water. That being said, anyway, so I think every scene with Clue is great, and this is the thing. I think Jeff Bridges gives a great performance as Clue. Granted, it's CGI things. I was messaging you before. I was like, there is some really like badass slow motion shots, and it's the entrance shot of him in his helmet. It's like the cape, the slow motion, the Daft Punk soundtrack. I was like, when they build up to Clue, that this is a guy like not to fuck with. That's the main core of it, right? He's gonna kill everyone that gets in his way. He's got his one goal, and that's how he's doing. And I love everything. And you can tell he's being over the top in the performance, and that's what we like about villains, right? The really over the top stuff. We spoke about the Mandalorian last week where, isn't it great when they say their speeches, i.e. the speech at the end of the episode? We had the opening Flynn's missing montage of his NCOM speech. Then we get it at the end of the film with Clue addressing all his army, doing the same words, switching it around. I love those little parallels to one another. I think it's really tight. And that's why I don't mind the CGI, because the idea of Clue isn't this cheap, we can do we can do Flynn but younger. We're creating this character which is a reflection of himself, and as you said at the time, and that's why it doesn't bother me as much, because I appreciate what they're doing. If it was we just want Jeff Bridges for a minute, that'd be, did you need that? You know, if it had took Tron's helmet off, we got the great thing that he's Rinser, that would have looked weird. We got some great flashback scenes, and they have like a weird filter over the top. I think it looks a lot better in that, because it's not the direct, it's not the actual shot, it's the programming of it. So I love it when we did get the Tron flashbacks to see the younger Alan and things. But the whole Clue Flynn dynamic, I think is great. It's one of my favorite. It's like the tragic villain, isn't it? Like, you do empathize with him, that he's very two-dimensional, don't get me wrong, but it is that final scene. And it's when he realizes as well, the fact he doesn't actually try and kill Flynn either. Clue drops the disc because all he wants to do is just get that disc to continue his job. And it's the whole build-up, it's the music, it's the writing, it's Jeff Bridges' self-sacrifice, and
I think that's where it comes into it for me. I think you just mentioned it there, where you said that he's two-dimensional right up until the end. And because I love that end bit so much, I think that's the kind of stuff I wanted more sprinkled throughout the movie. We do get that good flashback scene, and I do like that. And I actually like how that's all constructed, and this kind of ties in with Cora's character as well. And I think this does give an explanation. Might be jumping ahead here to the world building, but why does it look so visually different from the first Tron film? Well, the short answer is technology and film advances, and they can do way more things now. But in universe, I didn't think they would offer an explanation. They kind of don't. I think it's more
throwaway. There's a throwaway term, isn't there?
I think it's more that the system's just been self-evolving, and then also obviously you have Jeff Bridges' character creating Clue, and then you have Tron in there as well. And they said, right, it's almost like Inception, isn't it? Like, we're going to create this perfect world all just from our imagination, however we want it to be. So I think you could argue as well, that's probably why it looks a bit more modern. It looks more larger than life compared to the original, because they're going in and completely changing it from the ground up. Maybe. I don't know. That's kind of in my head how it is, and how it all looks different. But
yeah, I can't remember. There's a really random throwaway line. It's like, when like he evolved the grid or did his second version of the really passaway line. It is that kind of like you can get over it, but it's the core that I think the flashbacks really help those character relationships, because we get to see the evolution, as you said, that even when it's like, this is his original light cycle, because it looks like the 1982 one, and then it's like, these are the 2010 pretty new ones, and
that make the transformer noise when they materialize out of nowhere. Do you remember that bit?
it's incredible. Still one of my favorites. The super slow mo. Like, every time I watch it, it's like Here Comes the Game Has Changed by Daft Punk.
Well, I was watching it, and like you talked about the 3D thing as well. I was like, I really wish I could be watching this in 3D. So when people get de-resed and like the particles just come out into the camera, I was just like, you can always tell the shots, and especially around that time when they do like the more gimmicky stuff. But I think that would have looked really cool. People falling off light cycles and like bodies falling in slow-mo towards the camera and everything.
The thing I remember this was depth. They got because it was shot in 3D. The depth, right? The light cycle scenes, even the little blue waves, felt natural, and that was my 3D tech demo to people that would come around, because the light cycle scene was the perfect one for it. The disc wall scene was also great for it. That's very on the nose. The let's split your body in two and have the disc come at the screen thing. But in terms of 3D, this was to me in that probable top 5. I think most people would say, if they really wanted to look back at 3D, what you got: Avatar, Gravity, Tron, Transformers
Dread,
3.
Maybe I don't know if enough people went to see Dread in the first place.
Yeah, that was
about it, but
they shut that one down. That was sad that what happened to that, but yeah, I think it will build up to that. I think really good thing to build up as well with Cora, if we want to get into Leave Wild, because her character, you kind of mentioned the Joan of Arc. I always kind of saw her as a Holocaust survivor. I mean, they have the in-universe, after the Purge this, the Purge that, and it was like the ISOs got wiped out. They are a naturally created program, and that's a really like interesting. It's like a reverse virus, right? So the computer's now creating things within itself, and I liked the idea that Jeff Bridges was going to take her into the real world and like not exploit her DNA, but like we can apply this technology essentially to the real world to improve humanity. And I like that concept, and I love the fact that, going back to Clue, to him that was an imperfection because it wasn't created. He was programmed in that mannerism for it to be the wrong thing, and I loved all that. not even a world, but it's like mythology building, isn't it? You kind of said it earlier. It's building, and when you do world building, you want lore. You don't just want a world for the sake of it. You want to see, there are these, even let's go back to Star Wars, A New Hope. Oh, the Clone Wars, and it's like 1977. Clone Wars isn't a thing, but there's something that's already happened in the universe that establishes time. I think once time can be established, it's a really good thing for these kind of films. And I loved all that stuff with her. I thought Olivia Wilde's phenomenal. It was probably one of the first ones I saw, and now she's moving as directing. The romantic in me was devastated that, could she have directed Tron 3? No. It was like clutching at straws for anyone to get that film greenlit, because she did really nice when they announced it. She was like tweeting Jared out like really nice stuff as well, and I was just kind of sad, like, couldn't you do it instead? But I don't know if I'm looking into the character too much, but I like that she came on as this sort of side quest character, and the plot isn't just Sam's plot; it also follows her. She's as important to this as the rest of them.
Yeah, no, and I like her character as well, because she's that kind of wide-eyed character as well. That she does want to get to the real world, and it's that scene where she says like, "What's a sunset?" and he goes like, "I've never really had to describe one before," and then you get that book ended with the final shot of the film. It's stuff like that I really appreciate, and I don't know if I can read loads into a character, but I thought she played it really well. I think she was one of my favorite characters in there, and I think it was a nice dynamic into the mix as well. I liked the inclusion of a character, and I can't really put my finger on it. I think it just works in the film and how it's structured. And going back to that thing you mentioned there, where she's almost like a Holocaust survivor, I guess there's another parallel you can drive there that Jeff Bridges' character, he is basically a dictator, isn't he? Like everything has to be according to his will, his grand plan, and his image, and everything that goes with it. So, and it was that lore building stuff. I'm always into my lore, whether it's fantasy, sci-fi, whatever. The more complex you can make that lore, the better. And I feel like this film was starting to do that. We got the original film for what it was fine. This one really started to build on that, and you could only imagine that it could go further and further, and there was more story to be told there, more history to mine, more lore and more mythology to go into. And I mean, I don't know where it's going to go. Yeah,
we have
exactly.
Tron Uprising, which is set between Tron and Tron Legacy, and it tells the story. Well, tells partial of the story before cancellation of this new character that Tron wants to train up to be the new Tron because Tron is wounded. I'll get to that another time, but that's on Disney Plus, guys, in the UK, if you knew that, because it never got aired here. It got moved to daytime TV, which no one watches weekdays. If you want lore, people want world building, check out Tron Uprising. It fills in not the gaps as such, but it's like, let's take a delve into the grid whilst Clue was getting bigger and stronger in this. And it's a really fascinating series that grew on me massively after a couple of episodes.
It's like, I kind of want to watch that, but also if it's been cancelled with no end in sight, then I'm not going to watch it. I hate when shows do that. It's such a shame.
It gets Olivia Wilde's got a cameo in it. Like they bring in clues in 1 or 2 episodes very briefly. The main villain's called General Tesla. If already the computer energy names went on the nose, there was certainly another one there. But
I guess Tesla's probably a good segue actually in a minute, because I just looked. We're going a little bit ahead in the schedule. There's one character we've missed, and we cannot miss this character out. This was by far my favorite character in the entire film. Michael Sheen. On this plan that we've got here, we just have Bowie. We just have David Bowie on here, and that's basically who he plays. That was my favorite scene maybe in the film. Just sort of in terms of world building, I love this nightclub. It reminded me of something from Mass Effect, just sort of like this sleazy nightclub in this sci-fi neon-filled world. The music as well. I've got to imagine, because I've never seen Daft Punk. I'm guessing they're the 2 robotic guys in the balcony, right? Yeah, thought so. I just love this scene, and I wanted to stay in this scene longer. It was like a sleazy, even more futuristic cantina bar from Star Wars, and it was great. And his character was amazing. He is playing Bowie. Every single mannerism. He is Jareth the Goblin King from Labyrinth. The way that he talks sounds like David Bowie. Apparently, he was an influence, and I think Tim Curry as well from Rocky Horror Picture Show. But he's all Bowie in this. He's all made up. It's the platinum blonde hair. It's the cane. It's the persona, the mannerism, the kind of campness to him. He was great. I wanted to see more of his character, and then he gets killed off, and that's it. That's all it is for Zeus.
It's my only gripe is the fact they kill him off, because here's a 2-dimensional bad guy. Here's the sleazy guy that's power hungry, and I mean, it's a phenomenal scene. His death, the build up is pretty great because you realize he oversteps the mark. But to wipe out his entire I love the end. The club's called End of Line. And it's the really funny like end of line, dude, and like blows up the End of Line club. It's that like, haha. Yeah, he did longer. He reminds me of like obviously he's Bowie. It's been like from day one. It's the pulled back hair, it's the mannerisms. He always reminded me of the Penguin as well. And I think that's because he like waddles with the cane sometimes. It reminds me of the old Batman films.
So
And
even during the action scene, it keeps cutting back to him doing these like random dance numbers with a cane, like a song and dance number. It was brilliant.
And it's got gun. It's a gun cane as well. Like it's incredible.
Like Saints Row, isn't it? Did you ever play that Saints Row the Third? I think gun cane was one of the playable weapons.
And like because he can't say every scene is he steals it, but every shot he's in, he steals it. It's like here's this really intense like action scene. Even from the moment. The delivery of every line, I love it. It's how to like quiet the ride, and then like in comes everyone just like squashing them, and it's the whole. It's that world building, right? If you had this perfect world where there's only 3 people that cared, and every other person was a faceless army, because we do get a faceless army. It's that okay, but when you bring in these new people here, there, granted, it's a very supporting role. Even as a whole of the world, like. At the start, before they get to the games, you've got the guy like screaming like not the games, not the games, not the games. Everyone's got personalities, whether that's in the hair, the face, the tattoos. It feels like I've been playing a lot of Cyberpunk from when it doesn't crash. I'm playing a lot of that this week, and it is that everyone feels different. It's that RPG environment. We kind of said it in that video when I said films I want to see as games. You could see a RPG set in this Tron world because everything's so different. It's so out there, and I think Sheen helps bring that in. I think he's really important for this film. It is my favorite performance from his, followed very closely by when he plays Clough in Damned United. But there you can't applaud it. He's got also the fact that Daft Punk cameo in his club as well. It's not if you know it's Daft Punk, you know it's really obvious. But it's that the bit I always love. It's when he has his custom stairs and he like jumps back. It's like, oh, I'd like design them myself. That's how I like. It's that not that you can say it. It was like I wish I could say something like when I do things like that. But he's just incredible. I don't know. It's that whole world building stuff, isn't it? You can't have the world building if every character is going to be the same. And I think they need a bit of light energy from him.
It's like we didn't get characters like that in the first Tron film. That's why I like this one. It's like I wonder what other characters are out there in this world that exist in this world and operate. Maybe we'll never know. I don't know. But talking about Daft Punk, the cameo there, we need to talk about the music because the music is a character. It's a layer in this film completely. Jesus, I don't know where to begin. Okay, right. So Daft Punk is obviously like a band, artist, whatever you want to call them, that I have heard of. I haven't visually seen them. I guess that they were the robotic guys there just because it's the completely unique look to them. And I don't know if all of their music is similar to what they've done for this film, or if it's something a bit more Skrillex-y or a bit more techno, a bit more like kind of stuff. If that's the case, then I probably won't be into it. But I've got a massive love for synthwave, like 80s retro synthwave, just ambient synth that you'd get in like any kind of like 80s film. I think it's actually almost had like a comeback now. We've had so many things like Stranger Things, especially with that kind of sound to it, and I love it. It's great to just throw on in the background, just chill out to, whatever, go on a night drive to. That's exactly what I'm going to be doing with this soundtrack when I listen to it. It's incredible. Now, I kind of compared this a little bit to Blade Runner when we were talking a bit before. This was before I watched the film and when I was giving my predictions on the film, in that Blade Runner, you could probably read into the characters a bit more in Blade Runner. It's had that time. There's probably countless essays out there, and I think there probably is more to the characters in Blade Runner maybe, but on first viewing, maybe even on first couple of viewings of Blade Runner, the characters are kind of flat and everything feels a little bit boring, and maybe boring might not be the right word. The most interesting thing in Blade Runner still to this day to me is that world that was created, the vibe, the feel to it, the visual look, and Vangelis' score to that. And I think it all comes together to give that really rich, it's almost like it's creating a fantasy world, a sci-fi world. And that's exactly what this did as well. And this is my biggest takeaway from this film, is that I adore the look of it. And when you've got something like that, I even said to you, when you showed me this background that you'd done for the stream, I could already hear the kind of soundtrack that it was playing in my head to go with a visual like that. And I hadn't even seen the film, hadn't heard an ounce of the soundtrack at that point. This might be one of my favorite film soundtracks now. After listening to this, I would like to listen to it in isolation. I did ask you, because usually I listen to film soundtracks on their own and then watch the film. I used to always love doing that, sort of like predicting what would happen with the film based on the soundtrack and the journey that the soundtrack goes. But you said no, watch the film first and have the whole package. But now I'm going to definitely listen to the soundtrack of this separately. It's fantastic. I don't know if this was nominated for an Academy Award for the score or anything, but I think it deserved to, because it really does add a character to it. And they didn't just do the electrical stuff, they did like all the orchestral stuff as well. It was all them who did the music to this.
Yeah, this is a game changer for me. I've spoken about how important this one was. You know me, I'm not big on music. For the people at home that don't know that, I go to the odd gigs, I like my soundtracks and stuff, but I can't tell you things about musicians that I could tell you about film. I can do a film quiz and score high, but the team that's going to put me on knows I'm not going to basically help on the music round unless it's something so obvious that anyone can do it. Mm-hmm. Now, when I saw it in 2010, the sound, obviously IMAX have their own sound speakers, like this music is something else. And I went home, I listened to the soundtrack online back in the day on YouTube, and it was this new thing. I was like, oh my God, who are these people? And I was like, what's Daft Punk? And obviously the two helmets. I was like, oh, okay, they're from Tron. And I started listening to their albums. I've got most of their albums, well, not on vinyl. I've got Random Access Memories on vinyl, Alive, and this one. I don't normally do this kind of braggy thing. But Chris, you know the backstory with this. This is my Tron Legacy vinyl. Mm-hmm. Very recent purchase, I must add. So this had a tremendous impact on me. And go back to 2010, vinyls aren't what they are now. Very few were made back then. It was the ultimate cult thing. People still had vinyls, they would say. And they released Tron Legacy as a vinyl. Now, I didn't listen to vinyls back then. My parents didn't show me how to use theirs. They didn't want me touching it because it was very much not my generation type thing. And it must have been 2015, 16 way when I started listening to them. I was like, I need to try and get some of my favorite soundtracks on vinyl. Like, it's become one of my things that I mainly get soundtracks. And I remember seeing Tron Online. It was going for like 120 quid, 140 quid, like back in like 2016. It was a limited edition run from the release. Because people didn't buy vinyls then, it was so limited. And obviously, one day they're going to re-release it and I'll be able to get it easily because vinyls are big now. And then it was all quiet, and I checked again last year and it was still expensive. I was like, why haven't they released this for? And then very late night, a couple of months ago on a Friday night, I went on my local record store's Instagram, and it was record store day the next day. Front and center was Tron Next. I was like, what have I missed? So text him was like, is this like normal record store day? Because of Corona. I was like, can I just reserve it? He's like, sorry, you have to come in. I was like, how many do you have? He's like, 5. And I knew that a lot of people that do record store day just buy them to sell because it's limited edition. You have to buy them in person, one per store. Really hard to get duplicates. And they can't sell them online or reserve them. They can't even buy them themselves to stuff. So I got there on a Saturday morning. I think I was up till like 1. I don't know if we were doing a video or something, but I went into town at 6 a.m., 5:30, 6, and I parked outside the record shop, and there's one person there. And I waited an hour until I saw someone walking. I was like, okay, now I'm going to take second place in the queue. And that vinyl came. I think it was the day I saw Tenet in London, because I had a really early start, actually. So that would have been a month after we saw it, end of September. Mm-hmm. And I finally picked this vinyl up, one of the most satisfying purchases I've ever made. And I'll show you the middle bit is the Daft Punk cameo. It's them two as well.
Nice. That's cool.
I'm yet to listen to this because it's a bit harder to listen to everyone working from home. But that is one of my favourite purchases. It's in my... I'm going to count Star Wars as one, not 11 individual films. Daft Punk's probably my top 3 to 5 soundtracks. Probably 3, actually. If I'm going to add in all the elements of impact, it's probably in my top 3, maybe even top 2. But as you said, the music is a character. This film can't work without them. When every Tron announcement has been made, even neutrals say, you must have Daft Punk to come back. And when they made the Tron Uprising series, Daft Punk weren't involved in it, but they used whoever helped, so they composed the soundtrack, but they always had an orchestra and someone helping with them. The person that they had helping with them did the music to the animated series, and it felt like Daft Punk, but it was enough of its own thing to suit being an animated TV series. Mm-hmm. But the soundtrack makes this film. This film doesn't work. It's that, it's got the CGI, it has the music, the character and maybe the story is not as well executed, but because there's so much going on of the other stuff that I'm sold with and beyond sold with, that's had that impact on me. So sorry to keep ranting and giving stories, but this soundtrack is unbelievable. And if you want to think about how this soundtrack went in culture, it was so popular. They released a remix album called Tron Legacy Reconfigured. This came out, by the way, not a year after, 2 years after the film. This came out after 4 months after the film was released. That's how big it was. I'm just going to list off some of the people that like I said, I know some of these. This is the dubstep era, but you've got a band called the Glitch Mob who I've heard of. Moby did a song. Cascada did a song. Avicii did a song. There'll be more names that I haven't heard of who are probably much bigger, but these are big names that do that kind of thing. And they have their own.
Oh, I'll be listening to that afterwards. I'm a huge Cascada fan. I'm gonna announce that out to the internet. I love me some Cascada, some early 2000s Europop. Love it.
And that's the thing. Like, how many soundtracks get remixes of an original soundtrack formally released via the people? It's superb. Honestly, I can't, again, nothing but praise that. And even actually going back into the film, even though we have the electronica stuff, all that kind of Daft Punky stuff, even when you get the core emotional scenes, that works. One of my favorite tracks is called Adagio for Tron, which I almost spoiled you yesterday almost by mistake. I was like, oh, I can't really say the track name because Adagio for a character. And that's the flashback when he dies but doesn't die, and it's just so well done. They both nail the music and the emotion, and combining it into one makes a perfect soundtrack. And I think so many soundtracks can struggle to get both elements of that kind of thing, but they nailed it.
Speaking of Tron, I guess I'll probably be moving into my final thoughts a little bit now with it. I would have liked a little bit more Tron as a character.
Yeah.
He definitely had a lot more to do with the first film, but even then he was like this weird secondary character, wasn't he? But he was the title of the film. It was weird, but I would have liked more Tron there, I think, somewhere, because he is in the film, he's in those flashbacks, and then he gets reconfigured, and then he, becomes the villain at the end. I forgot the name of the character that he gets changed into. Basically just the villainous version of Tron. But I would have liked more Tron in the film. I think that's probably just like a really, really small criticism. But final thoughts, I thought it was a solid film. I think conceptually, visually, and music-wise, it's head and shoulders above a lot of films that I've seen. It's just sort of like the story and the characters that do let it down, in my opinion, a little bit. So it kind of averages out the film a little bit overall. I guess we can talk about the future, though, of Tron, because you sent me a little 10-minute epilogue video, which I think was on the Blu-ray that you mentioned, and I watched, and this was clearly pointing or sort of like a little nudge as to where the series could go to, or maybe ideas that they had, or ideas that they could extrapolate from that epilogue, and where they could bring those more into a sequel. We also have a character at the beginning of this film, which we need to mention as well. Very, very small cameo from Cillian Murphy in this film as Dillinger's son. And judging from the special features and where it was going to go, he would clearly have come back. He'd probably be the main antagonist, and we'd have Dillinger again. We might even have the MCP. And with Tron, the world kind of being erased almost, like hard factory reset, that could clearly be rebuilt. Maybe Dillinger could create a version of Tron, their own villainous version of Tron, or something like that. There's a lot of ways it could go, and maybe there are still a lot of ways it could go. We know that the Jared Leto film's meant to be happening. I think that even in itself might almost be like another soft reboot again, which is a shame, because I think this could have shaped up to be like a really good self-contained trilogy, or even just one more film to complete a Tron trilogy from the original back in '82 to the new one. It's a shame, because I do think it is a fantasy world that I would love to see more lore and more mythology built into, and I do think there is room there to do it, especially with technology nowadays as well. This still looks great now. It's 10 years old. CGI's come a long way since then as well, so there's probably even more things they could do, new applications they could do. It's just I don't know if the next Tron film that I want is a Jared Leto Tron film. I would have liked to have seen a continuation to this.
This is my issue. The epilogue's incredible. They, something to set up as so minuscule that only the hardcore fans know, like a character called Ram, who we didn't even speak about yesterday. It's like this side character from the first one. Like here's the actor 35 or 30, 20 years later. And then it's obviously teasing up, oh, we've got this, we're setting up this new film. There's a new board. Encom's back, Sam's back, and Dillinger's kid, he's a good one. We'll keep him. It's like, aha, the plot thickens. Cillian Murphy cameo in 2010, I must say, pre-Peaky Blinders. Inception came out 5 minutes earlier. It wouldn't have been done hand in hand. This was probably filmed first.
Yeah.
It's been so long in post. And it was that tease, like, oh, like, it's Dillinger's son. Like, we're going to get now looking back because every year went by, I was like, Cillian Murphy could be in Tron. I mean, he's jumped into A Quiet Place too, so if the chance came, who knows? Maybe he will. But the future of the franchise is sad because Tron Uprising, the animated series, was announced even before Tron Legacy came out. And the animated series took years to develop, but they had all this planned out. The Tron was going to be back. They had the concept designers that did Legacy to do it on Tron Uprising as well. They even got Frodo as the lead voice actor to go with Bruce Boxleitner, who is playing Tron in that. Tron story in Tron Uprising is incredible. He's the main character. And we learn so much more. Even though it's cut short, it's sad, but because you're getting so much more knowledge of the grid and the world, I still really appreciate that we got, because there's been nothing, I appreciate that we got something, if that makes sense. But I mean, it's really sad we're not getting the proper Tron 3. And I'm not going to be harsh on Jared Leto, because if they'd have announced Tron 3, i.e. Joseph Kosinski, Garrett Hedlund, Olivia Wilde, Jeff Bridges with this Flynn Lives campaign, Cillian Murphy, if they'd have said like Jared Leto's going to be in it, I don't have any issue with Jared Leto, to be fair.
No,
I know he's a meme with the Joker, and that's probably the meme culture comes from it all. But it's like when he was in Blade Runner, it's what we both are like, oh, he just kind of just disappeared. Mm-hmm. And he had this big setup, he just went out the window. And I think Jared Leto is a fit for Tron. So when it was announced a couple of years ago, it was that Suicide Squad laugh, like, how of course there's a Jared Leto Tron film coming out. And then it went quiet. And then I think it was earlier this year, like Disney were like, someone high up, like, no, like it's genuinely happening. There is a Jared Leto Tron film. It's going to be called Tron Ares. Ares, we know, is the mythology god of war. So
Ares, yeah.
Ares, sorry, I was pronouncing wrong. So yeah, Tron Ares is the name. Now, the rumors are that they would like to get some of the cast back, but it's not confirmed. Disney wanted Joseph Kosinski back, and then they ended up hiring somebody else who I've completely forgotten the name of. He's called Garth Davies. I'm just going to quickly... he did that Lion. He did a drama called Lion a couple of years ago, which I think was up for a couple of Oscars. And a Mary Magdalene film.
Yeah.
So again, I'm not going to critique who they hire because Joseph Kosinski it's his first film. So I'm more than willing to give it a chance. But because Tron 3 was set up to the point there was a script, there was a cast, there were filming dates, there were locations that were built, there was pre-production. I really hope that we get some, because the characters deserve something. Now, I feel that Tron is a franchise that Disney, ironically, as we said on yesterday's review, isn't something they've utilized. As one of their original IPs, which, it's not Marvel, it's not Star Wars, it's not an IP they bought. This is one of their core original ones. It's a shame they're still churning out Pirates of the Caribbean films without Johnny Depp now. And we're still not getting...
They make over $1 billion, that's why. That's why they're churning Pirates of the Caribbean films out.
I mean, this budget was 170. I think it made around 500. Was a December release, but again, it's so niche compared to their other big ones.
They did a lot of marketing for this, though, didn't they? Yeah. Tron Legacy, a lot of marketing.
It did turn profit. Even to San Diego before it was overly hyped. Mm-hmm. All the crowd noise in the arena was at San Diego Comic-Con when they announced the film. It was like, we're announcing this film. Do you guys mind recording some noises and we'll put it in the film? So all the chants is a Diego crowd, and only the hardcore Tron fans would have gone to a Tron San Diego Comic-Con talk, right? So it's one of them where the future of Tron is... I want to say I've got faith in them, but I don't. Disney announced their slate, and we know that everything we discussed, you can check out a video on for that. There was no Tron, but we know that this was the short-term Disney release dates. These are the next 2 to 3 years. And it did make me think early 6, like, didn't put Tron Ares, but I wouldn't want that to be this unofficial one-liner in a 3.5-hour PowerPoint presentation. Like, it needs to be its own thing. It needs to be made naturally. These clearly aren't easy films to make, but again, with modern technology, if they wanted to de-age, not that they should, they can do it better. If they think that this was so hard to build the world, the studio, the filming, the CGI, look at The Mandalorian behind the scenes. Disney own the volume. They've created this technology which is designed to be accessible on a lower budget. You could do Tron TV series. You could do another film. Most of it takes place in a small studio. It's not location. It's so easy to do. And I think there is masses of potential for this franchise. But the sad word is that we're still talking 10 years later using the word potential because it's not been utilized. Mm-hmm. I don't know what the future is.
So I was watching this with the volume in mind.
Yeah.
And I think it needs to be a film. From the angles they were doing in this, the sheer volume of digital stuff they've got going on, I think it needs that cinema experience. I think you could do a Tron TV series maybe in live action and have it very much corridor based, but I think it would be almost like the restrictions of the first Tron film, where you're conscious that it is corridor based. You won't get those sprawling, not as many anyway, and they wouldn't be able to do nearly half of the stuff they did with this film, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, it depends, I guess, how big they want to make the set things, but because there's not many. You look at Mando's. If it's like him riding like a ship, it'll be like half a ship, and the rest is CG. Because essentially, they're building the world in a computer for them to then stick a VR camera in and turn that into an actual shot or whatever. So, if they're already building this world, which it looks like they did, just carry on. So, there's potential. It should be a film. I'm the same. I want film, and I've got no issue with Jared Leto being in it. It's because of how close we were to something, and it's also the fact that Joseph Kosinski spent so long doing Top Gun 2. We know that film is finished because it was meant to come out in July. So get him in. Like, not to be again.
Is he working on something else after?
He's got a lot of projects. He's got a lot of projects lined up. He's one of them directors like Spielberg that gets tied to like 6 different things at once.
There's a film scheduled for 2022 called Spiderhead, science fiction film again. 2 prisoners take part in a new drug test in order to shorten their prison sentence. That's the premise for it so far. So
yeah, it's just one of them which I think there's so much potential here, and I think Legacy, again, what I spoke about at the very beginning, if I'd have been a kid watching this, I remember a lot of Tron Legacy merchandise at the time, and I think kids would have
video games and everything.
Yeah, and I think if you're not going to release anything, those people are going to go. I'm not going to say this was ever going to get bigger than Marvel, no, but if you consistently had things, you're going to get people coming back or going to it. But by just doing a one thing and leaving it done, it just doesn't sit right with me. I know that's me being a bit weird again, but there's just something that they've missed out with. And I would like them to get this going. They're not short of cash. They've made many films with much money over the last couple of years. So, like I said, I'm excited when I'll be grateful when the Jared Leto one comes out. I'd imagine they would find ways to get cameos in, but using the term like Ares, there's any definition, it's war. Is it a sequel? Is it a prequel? Is it something new, something spin-off, another developer? But knowing we're not getting outright Tron 3, it is slightly underwhelming until I see something or an official cast list or an official, this is day one of production. I'm not believing it's happening because I've been too close. I've been scorned once too many times.
Yeah, it's weird. It's just been a franchise that's never took. You had the first film, which didn't do particularly well, gained a cult following eventually, followed it with a sequel so many years later, doesn't spawn a franchise. We've had the animated series, which ran for 2 seasons, did you say? 2 seasons, was it?
One series of 19 episodes.
Oh, there you go. 1 season cancelled, and then a nebulous 3rd film that might come out at some point. So it's strange because I do think there's the potential there, but I would like to see a bit more consistency with it now. And I will say, like Legacy, like visually, it's not consistent to the first one. That's just technology. But in terms of what they did with the characters, it is like a second chapter in a trilogy essentially. But I don't think you'd get that with a 3rd one. I think that would be a complete getting a new audience in, new everything. But who knows? So I think I've said everything that I can on Tron Legacy. If you have, yep. So that will do it for our review on Tron Legacy. And obviously this is pre-recorded, so we're not talking to anyone right now, but hopefully you've been watching along and commenting too. And we want to hear your thoughts on it as well. Let us know what you think of Tron Legacy, and where you think the future of this franchise is. Like, comment, share, subscribe, all of that good stuff. And if you want to follow us on social media as well, we will have an announcement in just a second as to what we're doing next, but you can find information out on Facebook if you just go to Facebook Cinema Savvy, Twitter at cinema_savvy, and if you'd like to pick up any merchandise, we do have a TeePublic link in the description down below with some t-shirt designs there, so feel free to check those out. We will have, as of this, we will have one more Creed review coming out, which will be Creed 2 Tuesday next week. Then after that, obviously, we've finished the Rocky franchise, we've finished the sort of like the little 2-film epilogue of Creed, and we've finished the 2 Tron films. What are we moving into next? Well, it's almost in a similar vein in some way to Rocky. It's another sports franchise, and it's actually directed by the original director of Rocky. And we are going to be moving into the Karate Kid franchise. We're doing everything except the Jackie Chan remake. We'll have reviews on the original Karate Kid, which you can find on Saturday, 19th of December. I don't know if we decided a time on that yet, but it will be the usual time. I think at 10 p.m. probably GMT. We'll be following that up with Karate Kid Part 2, Part 3, the next Karate Kid, and then we'll be going straight into Cobra Kai. We don't get a break on this channel. We're moving straight to Cobra Kai Season 1 review, Season 2 review, which will be a nice catch-up, and then we will also be covering Season 3 when that airs on Netflix. I think it's January the 8th, I think, the 6th or the 8th, something like that. We'll be going into that as well. So we're just going to be dedicating the entire latter half of December into January to the Karate Kid. I'm very excited for that. It's one of my favorite franchises ever. Cobra Kai is fantastic. Really looking forward to that. And also, it's kind of a shift. Tron was new to me, and I think you've probably seen the original Karate Kid, but you haven't gone beyond that, I don't think.
Not everyone's told me to watch Cobra Kai, and I've said, I've not seen the other Karate Kid films, so I can't justify watching it because I would want to watch the others. And everyone's like, season 3 is coming, season 3 is coming. I was like, I will get to it before season 3. So it's new territory time. It's the Rocky films, I've seen them, of course, in the past, but it'd been a while. This is that similar vein. It's got that new and old. It's got what have they done to change, and I'm excited to go through these for the first time properly. I'm glad there's no Jackie Chan one. Well, it's not really Jackie Chan's fault, is it? Let's be honest, it's Jaden Smith's.
I've heard it's all right, but it's I don't know. We just didn't have the time. We have so much covered in December coming out that it's we were trying to lighten the load a little bit. It's still going to be a great month, so hopefully some of you guys who have been following us on Rocky or even the Tron ones come along to that one as well, because that's going to be good fun going through that franchise. That'll do it for us for today. We will be back on Friday this week, though, for Mandalorian, the big season finale. I have no idea where it's going to go. I've been loving this season so far, and I think it's going to be a good one. So please join us for that. That'll be 10 p.m. GMT as well, as usual. And we'll be covering the final episode of that with Dave from The Life of Brian. We had a really good discussion last week on it, and it'll be good to see the franchise out with him as well. So that'll do it for our video today. Thank you to everyone that's tuned in and commented along, and we'll see you guys in the future.